Did you guys ever wander the action aisle at the video store during the 80s or 90s and see Steven Seagal and his ponytail glaring at you from every VHS cover? If so, you're in the right place. In this video, we're exploring 1988's Above the Law, talking about how it worked as an action movie, how it launched Seagal's career, what it did at the box office, why it exploded on home video, and how it instantly turned aikido into the trendy martial art. So let's rewind the tape and hit play on the movie that took Seagal from the dojo to Hollywood.
Here we go, Mr. Big Balls. I'm gonna take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank. Go get my pies out of the oven! My friend, he's a little bit country. I'm a little bit rock and roll. What does that mean?
What's up out there, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is Movies Never Say Die, your home for pure 80s and 90s retro content. Now, Above the Law was a staple of my childhood, and if you were an action movie kid as well during that era, then I'm sure it was for you too. This was also the movie that would build the whole mysterious aikido badass with possible CIA connections persona for Seagal as Hollywood's newest action star, and Above the Law was a textbook 80s action movie, a callback to when you'd check out a movie just because the dude on the box looked like he knew how to break your arm in 17 different ways. But let's pump the brakes before getting into Above the Law. Since this is the first video in this Seagal series, let's briefly talk about how he showed up in Hollywood to begin with. Now, before he was front-kicking villains through car windows and snapping bones like Slim Jims, Seagal wasn't a movie star at all, nor was he an up-and-coming actor taking bit roles in small movies to work his way up the ladder like his peers. He was an aikido instructor, bouncing between Japan and Los Angeles, running dojos, doing bodyguard work, and collecting wild stories that may or may not hold up in court. So he was pretty much the living embodiment of John Kreese, but with much better sideburns.
In 1969, I was invited by a friend of mine to an American embassy party in Tokyo. Get the fuck out of here. Oh boy.
This is where Hollywood talent agent Michael Ovitz comes into the mix. Ovitz was an agent to stars such as Cruise, Costner, Stallone, Streisand, and many others, and during this time, Ovitz was one of the most powerful behind-the-scenes players in Hollywood. He was also a student at Seagal's dojo, and imagine showing up to martial arts class one day and realizing that the guy stretching next to you also is the agent that represents Tom Cruise and Sylvester Stallone. Now, being in the business and having a bit of an ego himself, Ovitz felt that he could turn anybody into a star, and he was going to prove it using Seagal. Ovitz was also known for signing package deals for his talents with studios, and this is where Warner Brothers Pictures would come into play. Ovitz would pay for Seagal's screen test, executives would get a look at his martial arts skills, and he was promptly offered a contract. There was a pile of scripts Warner Brothers had that were intended for Clint Eastwood, one in particular that was very close to the production stage, only they were having problems casting a lead. So it would be passed to Seagal, who would then give it some rewrites to base it more around his supposed real-life past, and overnight Seagal would go from that guy with the dojo in LA to leading man in a studio action flick.
I don't believe it.
Now, in Above the Law, Seagal plays Nico Toscani, an ex-CIA operative turned Chicago cop who stumbles into this conspiracy involving drugs and C4 and a nasty CIA spook who's running dirty operations. So it's part cop thriller, part political paranoia, and part don't threaten my family beatdown. Simple but effective and relatively similar to other action movies at the time, and like those movies, here it works to keep the wheels moving forward. The Chicago streets feel grimy and real, so the setting works. It makes the movie feel a bit lived in. Pam Grier shows up as his partner to inject some charm. A pre-famed Sharon Stone is the wife at home, with Henry Silva serving up a charismatic villain, all while Seagal is walking around like a guy who's permanently one smart remark away from slamming you through a window. He would actually choreograph all the aikido himself for this movie, and To his credit, that flowing, bone-popping style did feel completely different from the usual punch-kick fare in the genre at the time. The action overall isn't necessarily fast, but it was very gritty, violent, and it felt surprisingly realistic for just being martial arts injected into a street-level action movie where it's usually all the traditional fisticuffs and gunplay, and it definitely appealed to the masses. After the movie hit, aikido got a real bump, and suddenly Seagal's struggling LA dojo was selling out its classes. Not a bad side effect for a film debut. Casting fun fact of the day, Chuck Norris was actually offered the lead of this movie first, but at the time he was right in the middle of a contract with Cannon Films, who weren't about to let him out of it, so Norris stayed put and Steven Seagal would slide in.
Bank on it, pal.
And somewhere in a parallel universe, Chuck Norris is starring in Above the Law, then eventually Under Siege, while Seagal is still yelling at students to bow before stepping onto the mat at his strip mall dojo. Now, financially, this was a modest production of just $7.5 million, and it was filled with relatively unknown faces. Seagal and Sharon Stone weren't household names yet, so really, Pam Grier was the biggest name in the cast, but not commanding a high salary. Warner Brothers didn't dump a ton of money into the marketing either, which probably didn't help the okay but not huge box office returns, and Above the Law would land in theaters on April 8th, 1988, taking the number 8 spot with a $2 million weekend. And really, Above the Law delivered exactly what audiences were expecting from it, and word of mouth would spread nicely despite the critical reviews being a bit harsh. Leonard Maltin would call this a slick but stupid action fest, and Vincent Canby with the New York Times claimed Seagal walked like a still photograph and looked like a seasoned runner-up in an Armani model contest. Regardless though, common moviegoers were entertained, and Above the Law would gross more than $18.8 million during its 7-week run, but the thing is, like a lot of these 80s action flicks, it really found its audience on home video and cable. If you grew up roaming rental aisles, Above the Law was just one of those boxes that was always just there, staring at you from the action shelf, begging you to rent it. That's where I would find this movie, which now turns the question to you guys. Did you first see this movie in theaters, on VHS as a rental, or on cable TV at night during some ridiculous hour? Let me know down in the comments. I'm curious to see where Nico Toscani first ambushed you back in the day. Now, over time, this one has ended up being ranked as one of Seagal's best, partly because it feels the most grounded and just hungry overall to prove its legitimacy, and partly because his run of good movies didn't last very long. I mean, is Above the Law a flawless movie? It's far from it, but it's a perfect late 80s time capsule and the blueprint for the whole Seagal persona of quiet speeches about justice and whispered threats, and then suddenly having someone's arm bending the wrong direction. Performance-wise, Seagal's not that bad for a first-timer, and I think he really does work extremely well in playing off of the experience of Grier, which is where he delivers his best scenes between all the action sequences. So as an action movie, I think it gives you everything you need. Chase sequences, some fight sequences, gunplay, and like other action movies from the time, the focal gimmick. In this case, Seagal's cinema-fresh aikido skills to give Above the Law its genre hook. You've got that wonderfully awkward yet iconic Seagal run during the alley attack. I mean, sweet Nancy Moses, look at that form. It's ridiculous. The dude's charging forward like his upper body didn't get the memo from his legs, but then we get moments like the store fight where the action suddenly feels razor sharp and legitimately cool. So it's clumsy in places, it's slick in others, and somehow that mix is exactly what makes Seagal's first movie so fun to revisit. So I'm going to give 1988's Above the Law 5 out of 5 Seagals. It was a great introduction to what Seagal could deliver in the genre, and it blended that with all the great tropes of a prototypical action movie from the era. It moves fast and makes the action the primary focus, while also benefiting from the charisma of Pam Grier to really prop up Seagal's performance during the quieter moments. And really, that's why Above the Law was the perfect launching point for Seagal. Now, next up, we're gonna be sliding into some coma revenge territory with Hard to Kill, because if there's one thing that early 90s Seagal taught us, it was that being mostly dead just meant that the comeback was going to be more insane. And if you did enjoy this video and you liked the retro vibe, you're definitely going to want to check out my Friday Night Rental series, where I dive into literally all corners of 80s cinema. You can check that video out right up here. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what memories you have of Above the Law. Did you like it? Did you love it? Is it just okay? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video. And until then, keep your ponytails tight, keep your VHSs rewound, and remember, movies never say die.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?